Happy New Year! It's the year of the snake. You know what looks like a snake? This entire meta, apparently. If you're like me and you spent the first hours of 2025 doom scrolling Twitter, you might have noticed some people are dooming about this snake-looking dragon, Levidras. But what is about Levidras that is making people so upset? The deck barely had any tops when it first released, and then even in Japan it was usually seen as the second best deck, so what is making it be so strong and powerful in English? Let's break it down. Levidras, used by Aikawa Kuon in the anime, was introduced as a deck that creates these infinity eyes markers, which don't actually do anything. It's Levidras himself that activates when something on top of a marker attacks or boosts. Typically, if your unit with a marker under it does something, Levidras will give it a 10k power buff. If your opponent's unit is the one doing something, then you can reduce its power by 10k, remove the marker from your opponent's field in order to draw a card. When it first released in Destined Showdown, the Levidras deck felt pretty stiff. Levidras itself had to counterblast 1 to put 1 marker each to both players' fields, and once per game could Divine Skill by Soul Blasting 1 once your opponent's on grade 3 to do the same thing, except this time also get an extra 10k and a crit to itself. This basically meant that if you went first, the maximum amount of markers on the field was 2, 1 each between you and your opponent. The problem lies in the fact that most of the support cards in the Levidras deck care about you having a marker somewhere on the field, and then they usually have an extra effect that only activates once you have 3 or more markers on the field. Take Anatoguster for example. He Energy Blast 3 to look at the top 2 cards of your deck, adds 1 to hand, and stacks the other on top or bottom as long as there's a marker in the same column as him, whether on your side or your opponent's. If you have 3 markers though, he can now attack from the back row and gains even more power. By the way, this is the first card that players find problematic from the Levidras deck, but more on that later. So how do they patch up this issue? Well, if you guessed, give Levidras an ability to make 3 markers regardless of whether it goes first or second on his first grade 3 turn, then you guessed right! Congratulations! Meet Destined King Levidras Empireo. By counterblasting 1 or putting a card from hand to soul, you can deploy 2 markers anywhere you want. Or if you put a Levidras by this cost of soul, you make 3 markers instead. There we go, problem solved. The real kicker is that unlike the original Levidras, you have complete and total control over where you put these 3 markers. Wanna go aggressive? Throw down 3 markers on your side. Wanna draw a bunch of cards? Throw down 3 markers on your opponent's side. Usually you do mix them around though, and that's the best part. You can adapt to whether you went first or whether you went second, whether your opponent is playing a deck with like a bunch of multi-attacks that hit for like 18k power or so, or if they're playing a deck that has a bunch of orders in hand and falls apart if you aggress them too much. I'd even say that everything else about Empireo is basically a bonus. He gets plus 5k for each original Levidras in your soul, which is actually one of the other weaknesses that the deck had before, where the original Levidras basically didn't gain any power on its own outside of the Divine Skill turn, so you'd have these like threatening rearguard columns, but the Vanguard itself was like pretty whatever. So that's one of the issues already addressed. And he also inherits the original Levidras's Divine Skill as long as that is in the soul. So you've got flexibility, you can get 3 markers down on turn 3 even if we go first, but what are we doing with all that? Let me show you what a typical turn 3 for Levidras looks like. But before I do that, let me show you this cool subscribe button. I want to make a lot more videos like this one this year, but they take a lot more time than the typical content that I uploaded throughout 2024, so your support really means everything in just giving me the motivation in order to do this. So if you could check if you're subscribed or not, that would be super appreciated. And if you're interested in seeing decks like Levidras in action, I actually do first-person perspective fight videos for YouTube channel members exclusively, where I go through my thoughts and plays as I go through them in the first-person perspective. So you get a lot to learn, and so if you really want to support the channel, you can consider becoming a YouTube channel member as well. Thanks for listening. Now on to that Levidras turn. We ride into Empireo, activating our Rideline Mantis-Scythe Dragon's effect to look at the top 5 for basically any card. Who designed this? What do you mean I can add PGs from this? Then we will slide original Levidras into soul for Empireo's cost. Let's say we want to neuter our opponent's first grade 3 turn, so we'll put 2 markers to their front row and 1 to our back row. Let's assume we went first, so we can't use the Divine Skill just yet. Let's call the aforementioned Anatoguster. Using its skill, wow, a Foxel off the top 2 and a front trigger to stack? Don't mind if I do. The Anatoguster can now attack from the back row since there's 3 markers in play too. That's 4 attacks going first, although his power is capped at 20k unless you put him on top of a marker, so in this case he's gonna be 30k. What's that in your drop? Is that the Shamnet that you discarded for ride cost just now? Damn, what are you waiting for? Let's call her right out. You can Soul Blast 1 to revive her since you've got 3 markers in play, and that's an attacker out of thin air. We can call down the Foxhole we found. He's a 15k booster if you boost your Levidras Vanguard, and if you counterblast 1 while your opponent has a marker in their field, you can give plus 10k to another rearguard and enable it to attack from the back row as well. That's potentially 5 attacks now. We still have 2 open circles. Oh, let's go Huli. She'll counterblast 1 to revive something and get 10k if we have 3 markers. And the revive target is... oh, look at this harmless little animal. Isn't he so cute? There's no way he'd do anything vile or crazy, right? So let's see. Often you'd swing with your smallest 20k attack, but since we know the front is up there, let's just swing with the Levidras first. Levidras himself is 18k since we have the original in the soul, and Foxhill's a 15k boost, so that's a total of 33k into your opponent's 10k body, by the way. Foxhill will now give plus 10k in the back row attack enabled to Squirrel, which we revived earlier. And there's the front. Now, here's the important part. Swing with the back row on Autoguster first. That's a 30k since he's on a marker. Now, let's attack with the Charmnet boosted by Squirrel. Charmnet activates, allowing you to retire one of your other rears. So let's do the Autoguster here to give herself plus 10k power. That's 23k on her own, 33k because of the front trigger, and now an 18k boost due to Squirrel getting buffed by Foxhole for a total of 51k. Your opponent's grade 2, by the way. Now, Charmnet retires herself after attacking to let you draw a card. How kind. We can just revive her next turn anyway. Then, Squirrel says, hey, wanna see me do that again? As he soul blasts 1 and is able to move himself to another circle in the back row that both has a marker on it and doesn't have any units on it. Well, look at that oddly marker-shaped circle right there. Don't mind if I do. Oh yeah, let me gain 5k while I'm at it, why not? And now you're given a choice. Opponent didn't hit any defensives. You can actually split these attacks, with this Huli being a 20k originally and now a 30k due to the front, and the Squirrel being 23k due to his own and Foxhill's effects, and now a 33k thanks to the marker that he has moved to. Or, if your opponent hit defensives and you want to push this damage, you can just apply the boost for a solid 63k on turn 3? Seriously? I think you can see why playing against this deck just once gets people to, whip out their phones and type away angrily on social media. But yeah, I hear you say there's so many key pieces moving around. There's no way you can replicate this kind of turn every single game, right? And you are absolutely right. Usually, you're almost always missing one of these many pieces, but that's also the thing. This deck can do a lot even when it is missing one of those pieces. No Autoguster? Just keep that space open and Squirrel will jump around instead. No Squirrel? That's okay. Double Charmnet with back row attack ability from Foxhill will still push crazy numbers. No Charmnet? Okay, this one's a bit tougher because she's both a free rearguard and she draws you cards and also opens up your empty rearguard circles. But we can compensate by just distributing our markers differently in order to give more power to the rears that we do have that we can make attacks with. Or you can put more markers on your opponent's side of the field to just dig for cards while nerfing their power, and you'll eventually dig into your pieces too. And if you're missing Foxhole, no worries. Squirrel can boost the Vanguard and then jump to another circle anyway. The real pain is when you're missing 2 of these pieces, but generally speaking, the longer the game goes, the more chances you have to draw cards from removing your opponent's markers, so you'll typically find a lot of your combo pieces throughout the game. So what, does this deck not have any weakness then? No. It absolutely does. By far, the worst thing that you could be missing is actual Levidras. I'm sure you noticed, but the only way to make 3 markers is to put the original Levidras or any Levidras named card from hand to soul by Impedeo's effect. If you can't make 3 markers on turn 3, basically half of your deck just shuts down. Like half of the text on each of your cards just gets erased. And that is why mulliganing for your Levidras is also the most important part of the, pre-turn 1 gameplay. This is also where the main issue of the deck also lies. You need the Levidras in hand for the deck to function, and it has to be the OG Levidras if you're going second to help recover from your opponent's turn 3 push. You need Foxhole to enable back row attacks. You need Charmnet since she's your best free reusable rearguard. You need an Autoguster to find all your other pieces and stack your top card of the deck. You need Squirrel for those crazy power combos. The mulligan in this deck requires so many different pieces, and the worst part is majority of them don't do anything until turn 3. The hand you're sculpting basically does nothing early game, and that's why I think they made it so that the grade 1 of the ride line gives you a free ride without ditching for ride cost, because your hand is just so frail early game. This deck has so few things to do early game that virtually the only card that does anything on 2 is the Aspronia and Saphira, being a grade 2 that checks the top card of the deck, lets you leave it on top or discard it, and then asks you to pay a counterblast to revive a rearguard. The best play is to revive a Shamnet on turn 2 since she asks for a 10k shield going first, but that's about all you're doing early game on average, and that relies on you seeing both these cards in your opening hand. Decks that have a strong early game or have a powerful turn 3 push, generally speaking, don't struggle into Levidras as much. And that is also why the Japanese and English metagames for this set look so different, and no, it's not just because of Raziel. Japan had 2 collab decks that generally speaking did quite well into the Levidras matchup, Love and Barry. Love I've covered on the channel before, being basically a better Majesty Lord Blaster, but Barry actually won the Japanese nationals, beating all the Raziels and Levidrases because of how aggressive it is and how good its turn 3 pop-off is. Sure, its late game is nowhere near as good as the top 2 decks, but it stabs the top 2 decks in exactly where it hurts, which is why it managed to excel in Japan. The English side is starting to adapt though. We've seen a lot more people interested in decks like Adaptability compared to the Japanese side, being a super fast deck that blows people up as early as turn 3 going first. I even made a video of it in action in a high stakes tournament, by the way. Please watch it. On my side, back when we were grinding for the WGPs here in Japan during this meta, me and my team, we looked at the meta and went, okay, we have Varga, we have Raziel, we have Levidras, we have Odium. All of these popular decks want to go first. So that means that if they win the rock, paper, scissors, they will always choose to go first. We need to think of a deck that actually, when handed going second, pops off in response to those decks. And I'm sure a lot of people will immediately just think, oh, stride decks, they're happy to go second. But even though they're happy to go second, they don't necessarily pop off on turn 3. They generate resources into turn 3 and then do more on turn 4. We wanted a deck that actually pops off on turn 3, and the deck that we chose for that role was Alkalivra. It's a deck that can do 5 attacks, and it also has a divine skill that pings a damage if you go second on turn 3. So it felt perfect in taking advantage of decks like Levidras, which don't really generate too much resources until the game gets longer past turn 4. So that way, even if they put down markers on your side of the field, you can actually try to aggress them and win just from the big pop-off. And the read was right. Our team finished top 16 with Alkalivra in the arsenal. And this is the point I really want to drive home with this video, because yes, Levidras is crazy powerful, but so was Bruce, and so was Bastion, and so was Magnolia Elder, and so was Chronojet, and Eva, and Shiranui, and Shoujo Doji, and there's always gonna be a best deck in format or 2. However, when there's a clear best deck, you're typically given 2 choices. 1, whip out your phone and just start ranting away about the meta, or 2, take a step back, evaluate what kind of decks you're going to be facing at the tournament, and try to find an answer that'll help you improve as a player down the line. Sometimes that answer leads to switching to a different deck, whether that is a deck that counters the most popular deck, or maybe it is to that specific deck itself. Other times, maybe your favorite deck that you really want to use as part of a nation that has a bunch of good generic tools that you can use in order to help you counter that matchup as well. If your locals is full of Levidras, maybe changing up your build with some powerful cards that do things on turn 1 and especially turn 2 will help you beat that Levidras matchup. Levidras is an anime deck, and Vanguard is one of the only remaining TCGs out there that is still based on an anime. And if history has told us anything, decks used by popular characters will always get support. Regardless of whether that support is good or not, I honestly think Levidras is going to stick around for quite a bit, because even in its current state, it definitely has what it takes to stay a meta threat. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, make sure you check out some of the other videos I've done on this meta. There's some videos where we analyze tournament games, including both Levidras and the Yellow to Glamour one I mentioned before, so make sure you check those out. Happy New Year!